Hello, and welcome back to Cape Corner, where we explore the history, story, and cultural impact of a different character or group every episode. I'm Blue, and I'll be your host as we take this journey together. With my first three episodes centered around superheroes, I thought this episode would be a good time to take a dip into the morally darker waters of comic books. Today won't be about a villain just yet, but it will be about an anti-hero. This one was a huge hit in the Bronze Age, especially the late 90s. He's the key player in an eternal war between heaven and hell, a human who became a god. Today we'll be looking at the One, Hellspawn, or as he's more commonly known, Spawn. Todd Mcfarlane is a Canadian comic book creator, artist, writer, filmmaker, and entrepreneur. The dude has a pretty serious pedigree in the comic book industry. A work with his name on it is sure to be hot. A big part of that fame came about when he worked on Spider-Man. His style of drawing the wall crawler is beloved by much of the fandom, even if many of the stories that he worked on aren't. I believe he worked in the Clone Saga, which is hit or miss. But no one can deny that his style of drawing Spider-Man is pretty beloved. He was also the one to draw the first full appearances of Venom, one of the greatest villains from Spidey's Rogues Gallery, and a character who would dominate the 80s and 90s pantheon of villains. He'd go on to be able to write and illustrate his own Spider-Man comic. That's how valued his work was. Not to mention, he made rad artwork of other heroes, like Batman. He would eventually team up with 6 other popular artists to form the brand Image Comics. At this point, Todd dipped way back into his old drawings, working on a character whose prototype he made way back when he was 16 years old, spending, as he puts it, countless hours on perfecting the design. The character was Spawn, which was released in May of 1992. Upon its release, Spawn #1 sold 1.7 million copies, which was at the time a record for an independent comic book. Mcfarlane would receive criticism on his writing, and would therefore go on to hire guest writers for some issues. I'm talking real industry giants. Alan Moore, Neil Gaiman, Frank Miller. Big names. With the level of talent behind it, it was no surprise that Spawn was seeing increased recognition and fame. In 1996, the heavy metal band Iced Earth released an album called the Dark Saga, which was a concept album for Spawn, with the cover depicting the character drawn by Mcfarlane himself. If I can deviate from my script for a second, I actually listened to the Dark Saga to prepare myself for this episode. It's 10 songs, the last 3 actually, which flow seamlessly together. Like, as the chord for one song fades, it then fades into the next song with the same one. It's great. I love that stuff when they do that on music albums. Love it. It's legitimately really good. You can find the entire album on YouTube or wherever. I would genuinely suggest checking it out, even if you only have a passing interest in metal. Where was I? Oh, yeah. There was also a 1997 live-action movie, not to mention an HBO animated series that ran from 97 to 99. There was a series of high-quality action figures. Spawn even appeared in the Xbox version of Soul Calibur 2 in 2002. He's also more recently appeared in other games like Mortal Kombat 11. Like, he is still popular to this day. He's got such an endearing success. Even people who are not big comic book fans often recognize Spawn when they see him because he's got such an iconic look. He was a smash success in the genre. But who is Spawn, I hear my lovely listeners ask. Seriously, you look great. Did you do something different with your hair? Well, I noticed. You're gorgeous. You should treat yourself to a nice snack. Fear not, my loyal, ravenous fan base, for it is I, Blue, and I have come with the fictional history of the character. A traveling salesman named Bernard Simmons would have 3 children in Detroit, Michigan, with a devil-worshipping woman named Esther Simmons, which just immediately seems like it's set up for some hellish shit to go on. The children were named Mark, Albert, and Richard. The second child, Albert Francis Simmons, was a very intelligent and strong lieutenant colonel in the Marines. He would go on to work in the Secret Service, the CIA, and onwards to the U.S. Security Group, which encompasses the CIA, the NSA, and the NSC. The Security Group was headed by a man named Director Jason Wynn, whose guidance turned Al into a highly capable assassin. During a mission in Botswana, Wynn hired Al's friend and partner, Bruce Stinson, codenamed Chapel, to kill him. Chapel fulfills the mission accordingly, burning Al alive, leaving his skin scarred and deformed. And like in Dragon Ball Z and Yu Yu Hakusho, the series really starts off when the main character dies. Since he was an assassin, Al winds up in hell, where he makes a deal with a devil known as Malbolgia. He agrees to become a hell spawn, his body infused with necroplasm, a dark energy matter. As a hell spawn, he would act as Malbolgia's soldier in the eternal war between heaven and hell. The power of necroplasm is infinite in hell, though it's finite elsewhere. He's also infused with a symbiotic suit, complete with chains and a cape. Al asked to see his wife Wanda one last time, and he's sent back to the land of the living. But there's a catch, as there always is with devils, and for especially cunning devils like Malbolgia, there is several catches. First, Al wakes up on Earth with almost no memories, still badly burned. He also has a demonic guardian, the Violator, who looks like a fat, disgusting John Leguizamo clown. And side note, John Leguizamo does play him in the live-action movie. I'm not intimately familiar with John Leguizamo's body of work. I've seen him as Luigi Mario in the Super Mario Bros. Movie, and I've heard him voice act Sid the Sloth in the Ice Age movies. But I can say for sure that he plays this role so well. He is disgusting and disturbing, and you just don't like to look at him when he's on screen, and he is everything that he should be as this character. Al initially only recalls his own name, and eventually comes to remember his deal with Malbolgia, but he can't remember his wife's name to go see her. He eventually gets a hold of his own CIA record to find her, only to discover that she's married to his former best friend, Terry, and they have a daughter named Cyan. It's here we come to the second catch. Malbolgia sent him forward in time by 5 years, long after Wanda has mourned and moved on. And I appreciate the fact that Al recognizes that the two of them didn't get together to spite Al or spit in the face of his memory or anything. They probably got together out of a mutual grief. They both loved Al, and they looked for comfort in each other's presence and company. And from there, just out of a need to eventually move on, things escalated. He still cares about both of them. I mean, neither one of them is doing anything wrong. And the Iced Earth album that I mentioned, one of the songs has a really good line. I can't remember the exact quote, but it's something along the lines of, "I still love both of them." And so Al knows better than to try and force his way back into their lives. You know, they're happy. It would be difficult to explain that he was sort of resurrected and all this stuff. So he just leaves. He's very sad, but he leaves. Al winds up encountering another Hellspawn who gives him some helpful advice. His powers run on necroplasm, and like gas in a car, it can be depleted while he's on Earth. When it runs out, he will die again, and he will return to hell. So he has a ticking clock on his powers, and he has to manage them wisely. Trying to find new purpose in life with the time he has left, Al strikes out, using his powers as little as possible to prolong his time on Earth. He became the dark antihero known as Spawn. Early on, Spawn fought thugs and gangs, brutally murdered a pedophile and child murderer, and forms a rivalry with the detective duo of Sam Burke and Twitch Williams. Spawn becomes the king of Rat City, the homeless section of the city. He meets a bum named Cogliostro, who seems to know way more about Spawn than the average man, and he becomes Spawn's mentor. He's also hunted by Angela, an angel warrior who hunts hellspawns as sport. There's even a cyborg mob enforcer named Overt Kill who almost kills Spawn, but our antihero emerges victorious. Angela would return with an anti-Spawn, an angelic warrior known as the Redeemer, as a secret weapon. However, the Redeemer seems to himself be tainted by evil, and that weakens his power. Yes, as it turns out, the warrior who was transformed was none other than Jason Wynn, the man who ordered Al Simmons' execution in the first place. It turns out he made his own deal with Malebolgia. He would grant the devil an incredible soldier to become a top-tier hellspawn to lead his army in exchange for a sample of psychoplasm, a powerful material related to necroplasm. Wynn used the sample to advance technology by leaps and bounds to engineer an empire and rise up in the world, which his elevated position is what caught the attention of Heaven in the first place. Spawn started off pretty street level this way, but the series would really escalate when Spawn becomes more embroiled in the war between Heaven and Hell. Being attacked by both sides meant that Spawn was fighting a losing battle, until a third faction called Green's World entered the scene. Long story short, they're another dimension whose power equaled that of Heaven or Hell, and they empowered Spawn so that he could combat both factions effectively. Green's World did this because the constant war was causing the Earth pain, which frustrated the third faction, which seems to sort of represent an alternate dimensional force that cares about planets like Earth. So in that way, it could be seen as Earth transforming from simply the battleground for the war between Heaven and Hell to a power in its own right. Green's World felt that Spawn could end it, so that's what caused them to sort of choose Spawn as their champion and empower him. Sometime later, Spawn would actually team up with Angela, the promise of graduating from hunting hellspawn to hunting devils being too alluring for her to ignore. They go after Malebolgia, and during the battle, Angela dies, but they do manage to kill Malebolgia. Having done so, Spawn is offered the opportunity to become the new King of Hell. However, that's when his mentor Cogliostro reveals himself to in fact be Cain from the Bible, like Cain and Abel. He was the first person to go to Hell, and he had planned to use a Hellspawn to take over Hell in the effort to become the new king. He wanted to rule the domain that he was the only one to populate for so long. In exchange, Cain returns Spawn's human form. This would of course not last, as other players like Nyx and Memon, another devil, caused Spawn to regain his powers. Spawn would frequently lose, gain, upgrade, and change powers, and his memories have always been removed or tampered with, and he's generally just been a pawn of these divine figures. Quite honestly speaking, it is the perfect setup for making a video game series around Spawn. I don't understand why they haven't done this yet, but you know how like in video games there's often this mechanic where by the end of the game you're like level 99 and you're so decked out on awesome shit that like at the start of the next game they have to write in some bullshit contrived way of why you've lost your powers and you have to regain them again. Like they do it with like Kingdom Hearts and just like every video game under the sun, especially RPGs, love to do this. And it is infuriating, but you know what? This series has that built into the story already. He is constantly shifting his powers around. And you know what? That would work so well in a video game, especially because, as I will touch on later, he has so many powers that you could give him a different power set to play with every game. Because, like, you can only map so many different abilities to buttons on a controller, right? So, have him have, like, 4 or 5 powers in this game, and then he'll have 4 or 5 different ones in the next game. Like, you could tailor the mechanics of the game and the environment based on what powers he has in that given game. It would be great. They should really get on that. Like, especially because, like, he's still popular to this day. If you say we're going to start selling AAA Spawn video games, people will buy that shit up. But anyway, yes, his powers are constantly in flux, and Spawn even became a god at one point, equal in power to God and Satan. But even without godly power, Spawn is no slouch in combat. Even as like a normal human with no powers, here's what he had. He is a master of hand-to-hand combat with peak physical condition as a human, acrobatics and athletics at the Olympic level, a mastery of judo, jiu-jitsu, karate, kung fu, jeet kune do, aikido, taekwondo, boxing, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, hapkido, Muay Thai, ninjutsu, and American karate. He also briefly studied taekwondo and was skilled in swordsmanship and marksmanship due to military training. And as if all of that physical ability wasn't enough, the guy is ridiculously intelligent too. He can fluently speak Japanese, Spanish, French, Chinese, Italian, Portuguese, Latin, Arabic, Persian, and Russian, and mind you, none of that is his first language, which is English. All of this was before being granted necroplasm. Now, as a Hellspawn, he has no need for internal organs. He can regenerate. His muscles have become so dense with superhuman speed, strength, and durability that he now weighs over 450 pounds. He has a symbiotic costume, Letha of the 7th House of K. His shroud, spikes, chains, and skulls are all part of an organism bonded to his own central nervous system, and they will protect Spawn even if he is unconscious. He can phase, establish psychic links. He has superhuman senses, telekinesis, cosmic awareness. He can transform his body. His necroplasm can empower him without exhausting him, and it can feed off of sources like the ambient evil of humans, animals, and even certain cities like Detroit or New York City, so his energy can replenish itself over time. He has a counter to notify him of how much of that magical energy he has left before he has to be sent back to hell. And he can use this energy in greater amounts to resurrect the dead, fire necroplasmic energy blasts, teleport, breathe fire, become invisible, read minds, transmute himself or others, manipulate the elements, fly, talk to animals, create portals, manipulate time, manipulate souls, warp reality, and cure disease. He can also feel or sense misery, pain, and hatred, and he's always aware when someone is attacked or murdered, due to his affinity with creatures of the night, always keeping him aware of mankind's anguish. He's practically immortal, unless he's beheaded by a weapon of heaven or by magic. There is one little weakness he has, where he's powerless in an area called the Dead Zone, not to be confused with Dragon Ball Z's Dead Zone. It is a small patch of Earth that intersects both Heaven's domain and the ethereal realm of Greensworld. In addition to everything I just listed out, Spawn also had the power of a collection of lost souls, known as the Legion. Detective Twitch theorized that these were the souls of people who died in the same hour that Al Simmons was killed, and there could be as many as 6,000 with him. I guess they just sort of came along for the ride when he got converted. I don't know. I don't understand the logistics about it, but who cares? It's really fucking cool. So they rendered him uncontrollable by Malbolgia, which is why Malbolgia had to wind up attacking him with his forces in the first place, because Spawn was able to go rogue. But Spawn could also manifest these souls physically as Hellspawn for backup, so he could have his own small army. Eventually, the physical Legion members were all removed or slain, and he could no longer summon them. But even when their souls ascended to a higher plane, he retained their knowledge and experiences. So on top of being ridiculously experienced and skilled and intelligent as a normal human being, he now has the physical knowledge and experiences of 6,000 other humans on top of it. God damn. And again, all of that was before he became a god. Spawn was an absolute juggernaut of the comics industry in the mid-90s to the early 2000s, and he's still beloved to this day. While other properties were being revamped for the extreme 90s and its Bronze Age, they didn't always translate well. Batman being replaced with Azrael with a weird Technicolor yellow and purple suit, Captain America being a werewolf, Superman with a mullet? Blasphemy. But Spawn was designed from the ground up to be pure badass, full of heavy metal imagery and enough machismo to permanently expand your dong. It was bloody, gory, gothic, had epic biblical confrontations and military-grade explosions. It in a way, it was sort of the precursor to like the God of War series, where it's like, let's take a popular religion / mythology and just amp it up to the most badass levels that we can. Let's make it extreme and gritty, like so ridiculously macho that nobody could take it seriously, and yet everyone could enjoy. It had a man who would regularly find himself lost in terms of where his life was at and where he was going, but through grit, angst, brooding, and the determination to slay all the evils of the world, he always pressed on. Spawn went to show that a person could use their own strength of will, and also, perhaps, some demonic otherworldly powers, to take on suffering and misery, and turn it into drive and focus. He battles hatred and depression on a daily basis. He not only has to feel his own pain, but the pain of the world around him. And instead of succumbing, he gives those forces in his mind a face. He finds someone who contributes to his pain, and he tackles them head on. The people who create suffering and distress in the world are his targets, and he will not let them rest. He will not let them escape. He will make the world better by eliminating the forces who seek to make it worse. In a way, he shows how negative emotions can be used as a force for positive change, real positive change. He never got too brooding, because whenever he was in the most pain, that was when he took the greatest action. And despite the fact that his work is never done, he always works to bring the world a little bit closer to something truly good. And you don't have to have a symbiotic suit or the powers of a deity to do the same. If you are struggling and you feel like things aren't getting any better, do what Spawn does. Get angry. You don't deserve to suffer, and you should have something better. Then you focus and temper your anger. You make a plan of action. Do something to better your circumstances, even if it seems scary. When we take a leap, we often find ourselves capable of more than we could have ever thought possible. And that will just about do it for today's episode. If you liked it, please leave a like and maybe a comment. or consider donating to my Podbean patron page. It'll help me improve the quality of the series and do more for you guys. Even like $1 or $2. Anything helps. Join the Cape Corner Discord, where you can engage with the rest of my community and suggest topics for me to cover in future episodes. Thanks to my good friend Crown for suggesting Spawn. You always have good taste, my friend. As for next week, I'm thinking, well, the new Mortal Kombat movie just came out. If you guys want, I can cover a character or two from that franchise. I do eventually want to branch into more video game and anime related topics as well. If not, if you want me to stick with the superhero franchise specifically, I can always just do a martial arts style character. It still sort of ties in with the Mortal Kombat theme, and it also fits with the recent Shang-Chi trailer. That looks really good, by the way. I'm excited for Shang-Chi. Either way, let me know what you want. Until next time, stay strong, stay true to yourselves, and remember, we can all be heroes.